You are watching the Writing Community Chat Show. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's Writing Community Chat Show. It is Monday, and we have another bonus show for you guys. This keeps happening. We keep finding shows for you to do on a Monday, and it's only down to the fact that we have an amazing schedule. We said it before, blessed with guests is happening way too often, and we can't turn it down. We have so many wonderful stories to share with you, and we just want to share them, so we fit them in where we can. Obviously, that is a time commitment, and you might notice that Chris Hooley is missing today. He isn't locked in a cupboard like previously known. He is just very busy, and I'm sure he'll pop in on the show at some point, or at least drop in the comments. Hello to you on the chat. It is fantastic to hear from you straight away and already. Please, enjoy the chat, enjoy each other's company, and obviously ask us questions throughout the show. Right, Chris is indeed busy. He is made me middle Chris, I guess, today. So it's only payback for the recent times that he has been carrying the show without me. We have a fantastic guest on for you guys tonight, and there's amazing stories to come within that story. And there's a few things that we're going to talk about and in terms of writing, in terms of book and life in general. So this is going to be very interesting. And as we're talking about life, there are a few things I want to mention, and you guys will know this. Today marks International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, and Transphobia. And as on this show, you guys will know, the ones that have been with us from the start, we've always supported the LGBTQ community, and we will do. And as I'm talking about that, please do check out queerindie.com, which is a platform all about the industry's books and their allies as well. So you'll find us listed on that website, and it's a fantastic website with a lot of time and effort gone into it. So please check that out. And it's Mental Health Awareness Week, which is very important. And it's amazing that in this day and age, we can actually talk about it so freely, because it's only recently been such a development, I think, in the world where, the stigma is now kind of more welcomed and encouraged to talk about. So please, we've mentioned this on the show before as well. Any mental health issues that you might have, it's kind of hard to talk about them at the time and you don't really want to, but please reach out to us or someone in the community and just send them a message, a tweet, even if it's as little as that, to start the ball rolling, because there's nothing worse than just taking it on yourself and kind of getting lost in that world. So please engage and talk with us as well. So thank you for taking the time to listen to that, and let's get on with today's show. So to start off the show, always the Be a Token book promotion is a chance for you guys to support the show and to sponsor the show with your book and get your book seen. So today's sponsor is someone that we've actually we've had as a sponsor before, which is amazing. And they've utilized our book review service. So we can't thank you enough for the support you give the show. And that book is From Voiceless to Vocal by Danielle Larsen, a story of living in abuse and pain, and then through her inner strength and support, finding her way to a new and better life. It is rated 4.9 out of 5 after 20 ratings, which is a fantastic ratio. And just for you guys, it is free as an ebook until this Friday. So download that and help the author get reviews. Please leave reviews. And of course, if you feel more generous, buy the book itself in a physical copy. You will support that author a bit more. And I will just read the blurb from that. From Voiceless to Vocal is a heartbreaking memoir about finding one's inner strength. A story of resilience and courage. This personal account takes us on a journey of survival. As told through the writer's first-hand experience, we see her learn about herself as she tries her best to stay alive, conquer the abuse and manipulation inflicted upon her, and overcome her own demons in the process. Her story proves that it is possible to get back up when you've been knocked down time and time again, and stands as evidence that it is possible to find your voice after it has been stripped away. We mentioned in the review that was a very powerful story, and a very brave thing to do, to share that. So thank you for using our services, and guys, please support that author. Thank you very much. So today's guest, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very excited to announce today's guest. She's written 15 best-selling novels, and her latest was released just last Thursday after a long delay. The Cancer Ladies Running Club has been called the most emotional, uplifting, and life-affirming novel of the 2021. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Josie Lloyd. Hello.
No, hi. It's great to be with you.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on, and I hope all is well.
Yeah, great. Well, it's been busy, publication week. I was expecting this book to come out last year, and then COVID hit. So actually, it's a long time, and I've been on tenterhooks waiting for it to come out, and it's finally out in the world. So it's a wonderful feeling.
I mean, releasing a book at any time is a long process, and you kind of very anticipation orientated, and then have to have COVID thrown in the mix, and then really wait, because a lot of people still release their books in that time, right?
Yeah, they did, and they didn't have any choice in that, and that's and I was really amazed actually how quite a few of the publishers and also authors and everybody kind of did a bit of a swerve and tried to find a way of getting books out to market. And the books actually, I mean, people have come back to reading in lockdown, people have shared their stories, but I had more time to read. So actually it's not been terrible, but of course it's kind of turned the industry up on its head a bit, because people have had to swerve and find ways of doing things differently. But I was really pleased because the second COVID hit, the publisher said, right, we're putting it back till May. And I was like, oh,
wow.
Okay. But
and
I'm
that
glad.
Really is a long time as well.
It's a book about kind of being out with your tribe and running, and we couldn't really do that in lockdown, so the message of it is actually quite well timed for now.
Yeah, there's been a lot of people, I think, during the lockdown that either became more creative and wrote more, or the opposite, who kind of got that sort of barrier there. And the same with reading, people picked up a lot more books, or they kind of read less. So it's been a really hit or miss thing. Did you find with the kind of previous work that you had more readers, or kind of less at that time?
Well, more readers, but from a writing point of view, it was very strange, because I live with Emlyn, my husband, and we've written together. I'm sure we'll come to that in a bit, but we've written together quite a lot in the past. And so when COVID hit, we were like, guys, we've got this. We've been doing this for 20 years, don't you know? We were kind of like smug, because we were like, people used to write articles about how weird it was that we lived at home and wrote together. And then COVID hit, and then I was like, oh, well, this is fine, except we have 3 hungry teenagers marauding around the house, and where's our kind of nice, breaks out to the pub when we are, we've got cabin fever. So I found it quite a challenge to write, actually. And one of the things that kind of really struck me was I've always thought, I mean, all writers always feel a little bit like a fraud. Everybody feels that they're kind of they're never good enough, and that they're not really a proper writer. And even after I've been writing for 22 years, I still don't really feel that I'm a proper writer. Anyway, so I've always thought I can fix this, because what I need is more time. I need more time, and I'm going to fix myself a lovely writing studio, and I'm just going to stay in there for 8 hours a day, and I'm not going to have a really busy social life and 3 kids and kind of like people popping round, and I'm not going to have lunchtimes. I'm going to be a proper writer. Anyway, all the time in the world happened, couldn't write a thing. I was like, this doesn't work for me at all. I realized that I'm somebody who needs to snatch time, and I write in little chunks and bursts, and actually that's the way it works for me.
That is amazing. And there's so many people that will relate to that, and, have that feeling that, you've got the time now to actually sit down and do it properly. And when you realize that you kind of work on the fly, and your instincts are what kind of give you the drive, then it's kind of a spanner in the works.
People, going to the pub, stories, seeing people at the school gates, all of that all feeds into your creative energy. And when you don't see people, it's really bad. Elizabeth Gilbert, and I was telling a friend of mine how terribly ashamed I felt of this, and she sent me this wonderful quote by Elizabeth Gilbert, she of Eat, Pray, Love fame, who's an author I really admire. And she said that she'd written something about writing. She said that writing should be like a lover, and that it's a snatched moment, a snog in a dinner party up against the wall, and that's how you should treat your writing. And I kind of thought, oh yes, that's it, that works for me.
Yeah, obviously taking a long time to plan out the session isn't quite the same, is it? Okay, so let's have a rewind then. You mentioned writing for 20 years, which is an incredible career already. Can we go back to before you were writing, and kind of where that flame came from, the inspiration? What prompted you to want to start writing?
Well, Mainly because I'm a big chatterbox, and when I was little, we lived in I grew up in Chelmsford in Essex, but my grandmother, who's Welsh, lived in London, and we used to go on these long car journeys. And my sister would always want to read; she was very bookish, and my mother was a teacher, so there was always books around. She taught us to read very early, so we always had this love of books. And my sister would sit in the car in the maxi. Do you remember the maxis?
I do.
Anyway, so we'd be in the back of the maxi and my sister would be reading a book and I'd be like, and my mother would say, write it down. And she gave me a book and a pencil and just write it down, prompting some hilarious diary entries of me trying to chart traffic lights changing. But, eventually I was writing down what I could see and thoughts and everything. And I'd get to London and my dear Nana would take me aside and she'd go, oh, that was really interesting. And she would laugh. And I realized that making somebody laugh through things I'd written, not necessarily for the right reasons, I can say, at that point, was actually kind of really nice feeling. So that was my very first instinct to be a writer. And then, of course, in the 80s, I read Lace and Jilly Cooper and Shirley. And I had this kind of real fantasy about kind of being in a white power suit, driving around in a stretch limo, book signing in Harrods. And, that's what I was going to do with my life. And of course, it's never turned. I've never been a stretch limo or to Harrods. But anyway, that was my kind of view. And I always wanted to be a writer. So I did a degree at Goldsmiths. I did an English and drama degree. And then I came out of university full of, gung-ho, and there was no jobs. And I did all sorts of things like telesales, and then I eventually landed up working in a sales promotion agency in London where I was responsible for the copy on the back of posters and on the back of cereal packets. So when you're reading the cereal packet and it says buy loads of cereal, you can buy this t-shirt or go there. That was me, right? So I'm writing Honey Monsters soccer pop-ups, right? I'm like, this is not writing a novel. So at 25, I had a bit of an epiphany moment and I threw my toys out the cot and I quit my job and sold the car, moved out my flat, got myself a little laptop, a job as a waitress, and off I went and wrote my first novel.
Wow, that's an amazing story.
Yeah.
Not only for the fact that, you went off and led your career by kind of putting yourself in a vulnerable position, but the fact that you were kind of writing these stories on the boxes and the promotional things, when you say you were writing them, were you just inventing the kind of text or context of that?
No, it's not really writing. You're writing terms and conditions. In fact, the epiphany moment came when I was writing the terms and conditions on a poster that was going on the back of staff toilet doors, right? Asking them to sell more Coca-Cola so that they could then get a baseball hat.
Wow.
And it was like 7 o'clock on a Friday night and I wanted to be in the pub and I was like, this is not writing.
No.
I want to write a novel. So, and I had absolute blind confidence of youth. It just never occurred to me that I wouldn't do it or I wouldn't get it published. I mean, it didn't even cross my mind at any point. I just assumed that it would happen. I don't know quite why I was so kind of, as I say, the arrogance of youth. Anyway, so I wrote this book and I gave it to a friend of mine who had just started working at Random House as literally a tea girl, and she was a graduate as well. And she edited it. She put a star on one page, and 4 pages later she put another star, and in between she wrote "one fuck too many." Which was standing joke. They had too much sex in it anyway. So I edited it, and then eventually it got passed around, and an agent said, an editor at Random House who was leaving on maternity leave said, this girl can write, but she needs an agent. And Vivian Schuster at Curtis Brown owes me a favor, get her to give her a call. So I call up, I send my novel into Viv, and Emlyn was her assistant, and he was the one who read my book and gave Viv the report and said, you should get this girl in to talk to her. And so I called into Curtis Brown with my manuscript, and I had no idea what an agent did. And she's Jilly Cooper agent and George MacDonald Fraser's agent and Margaret Atwood's agent. She's a proper doyen of publishing. And I'm in her office and I'm going, so what do you do then?
I love that scene.
Darling, I shall get you a book deal, and I'll take 10%, and then Emlyn walked in, and he made me a cup of tea, and that was that. That's how I met him. Brilliant.
I love that story. And just to take it back then to when you'd obviously got your sort of your university qualifications, and you had that in your mind, and the processes that you wanted to follow as a writer, and kind of life experience kicking in as well. So when you started writing this story on the laptop, did you at that, and only to the confidence of youth, but did you actually think that you, or did you know you what to do with that at that time? Once you completed the story, did you have any idea where to go there?
Not really. I mean, wasn't really aware of the kind of publishing process and how you went about it. I knew that you needed probably an agent, and it was quite different then. And actually it was, there was no self-publishing. You had to really get in through the door. So getting an agent was a really big deal. And actually it was a job for life at that point, because, you were paid decently, and there were lots of bookshops, and but it was a different time. Books were escapism, and that was the only form of escapism that we had. And we didn't have the internet. We didn't know what color Kim Kardashian's knickers were at the books were our escapism. So it was a very much bigger, it was a different time. And I was very, 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 very lucky. I mean, I got a real lucky break, and I was in the right place at the right time, and I'd written something that was pretty autobiographical, as most first novels tend to be, but it was funny, and I just wanted it in my voice and stuff. And also at the time there wasn't really that much fiction written by 20-something people. There was quite a lot of established authors, but I felt that there was a real gap in the market, because there wasn't very much with my voice. And that's when I met Emlyn and we started discussing writing a book together. That was our real motivation. It was like, where are the books for us? Where are the books for our voices? And I've always said, to people, if they write the book you want to read, and if you can't see a book in the market which you are looking for, write it.
Definitely. No, I agree 100%. And there's a lot of people that watch this show who kind of get into writing for the first time, or on the first book, still don't know the direction. And there's often questions about what they're writing, and it doesn't kind of suit people, or they don't really know where it fits. And I think that's absolutely fine.
Yeah. And I also think, also the longer I do this, the more I realize that writing is a process of scrabbling in the dark. I always compare, I think it is a bit like uncovering a sculpture from, you're burying underneath the mud, and you can see something, and you have to keep going, and eventually the form takes its shape, but you don't actually know what it is until the very last line of the first draft. And then you go, oh, it's that. Oh, if I'd known that from the start, I'd have written it differently. And that is the great conundrum, and that is the great frustration of writing, is that you don't know until the end. So, I think people get very tied up with kind of having to have a massive plan and having to have a kind of real target. But even with the best will in the world, if you target a book, it never hits the target as you mean it, ever. That's just the way.
I love that analogy, and a lot of people relate to it. So let's fast forward a little bit then. And you mentioned writing with your husband, and I imagine that's kind of an experience that most people maybe find daunting to start with. How did that go?
Well, I would never have, if you told me that I was going to land up writing with somebody, and that I would marry him and kind of write 7 novels with him and countless parodies and all sorts of, I would have got, what? No. Anyway. What happened was Emlyn and I became mates, because he was my agent's assistant, as I said, and he was working in Curtis Brown and writing his second novel, and I was writing a second novel and waitressing. And it was quite hard. It's quite hard to earn a living and write on the side. It's always been very hard. And so we would go out for these nights out in Soho and drink too much and compare love lives, basically, and laugh at each other's perception of it, and we would just have these hilarious conversations. And one night we were chatting, and Emily said, we should write this down, this is really funny. Anyway, I wake up the next morning with a stinking hangover, and I can remember it really clearly. I'm in my flat, and he rings up and goes, do you remember, he's whispering because he's at work, said, do you remember what we were talking about last night? And I was like, oh.
Do I want to?
And he said, do you want to have a go at writing a book together? And I said, yes. And that was kind of one of the biggest yeses of my life, because actually he went away and he went down to Wales and he gathered a whole load of his mates and he took an amalgam of all the laddish behaviour and all the laddie stories and wrote this chapter from the point of view of a character called Jack, who is a real Jack the Lad. And it finishes when he meets this girl in a nightclub and he taps her on the shoulder and says, "Hello, my name is Jack. And then I've got carte blanche to do anything." And he handed me this chapter and I absolutely loved it. It was so funny. And then I rolled up my sleeves and I thought, right, here we go. And I wrote Amy as a response to this. And when we put the two chapters together, because it was the boys' point of view and the girls' point of view, we realized we had comedy gold. And we sold the book on 2 chapters. There was a massive book auction. 8 publishers got involved. And the money went up and up. I mean, it was like winning the lottery. It was amazing. And all this press happened. And all of my friends said, whatever you do, don't get involved with Emlyn, because he's your ticket, because, you know, you've got signed up for 2 books together. You're going to be writing for 2 years together. You know, the foreign deals kept rolling in. It was published in 26 languages in the end, and incredible. Made a film. And whatever you do, don't touch Emlyn with the barge ball. That's not great advice to me.
Yeah.
Just go, because I'm like, we then just had this wonderful time of writing this warts and all 20-something book about these very promiscuous characters who jump into bed together and have to deal with the fallout, whilst we're being incredibly Victorian. And this is a novel of letters. It's kind of, he does one chapter, hands it to me, I do a chapter, hand it to him. So it's this kind of, and we had this kind of very formal, not getting together, not mentioning feelings thing at all until the very end of the book.
It's incredible.
And finally got it together. Yeah, so we got our working relationship very much established before we got together as a couple, which is good. And and then we kind of learn on the job, you know, how to write together. So
it's amazing. It's kind of one of those, if Carlsberg did romantic writing partnerships, I mean, you couldn't have asked for a better connection in that respect as well. Because it would have been very awkward had one of you been writing at the other half and, you know, taken it to a publisher and they said, actually, this side, you know, it's not very good.
No. Well, it had to work, and we realized that we worked. I mean, and it was very much, and still is, because we still write together, it's very much about wanting to make each other laugh. So that is a real, and it's really, people always go, what about collaboration stuff? Collaboration is fantastic. 2 minds are always better than one, and it's really fun if you get somebody that you can click with, that you've got an instant audience and you've got a rapport, and people can, you know, we make each other's work better just by writing it for somebody else, for an audience. It immediately becomes better. So yes, it's I've loved collaborating with things, and we have different skills. You know, we realize now over time that we had a really great conversation the other day about skills. Emlyn's brilliant at pitching, and he's also really brilliant at the detail. I'm quite good at throwing a mesh down of a story. I'm quite good at going bish bash bosh, this is the plot, and this is, we have to get from here to here to here, which is quite a skill, because you have to do that quite quickly and get the kind of structure down.
How is that process? Do you have like a big board, or do you just kind of write it down on paper as the ideas come up?
I know every time I think that I'm going to get a really foolproof method of doing it, and every time I change my method. Generally, it takes the form of notes, and I write lots of notes as I go along. And I tend to have one document where I'm doing the writing, one document which is notes and cut bits as I go along, and one that's a chapter plan. So I'm kind of writing a chapter plan, which kind of sort of moves, and chapters get put in. So that's kind of tends to be my method.
Brilliant. Okay, before we move on and talk about your latest book that came out just last week, can we talk a little bit about how that's good? Okay, sorry, nearly forgot about that then. The very Hangover caterpillar is grabbed my attention, and I'm very intrigued about this. So this is obviously one you collaborated with your husband with. Can you tell us about this? And obviously you talked about the humor of your writing, and this has had amazing reviews, and, you know, it's been really well received. So what's this about, and, you know, how did that come around?
So we've got 3 children who are now nearly grown up. We've got a 17-year-old and 14-year-old. But the house was always been full of books, and when they were tiny, we would read these books. And the first book was We're Going on a Bear Hunt, which is kind of Michael Rosen and Helen Oxenbury kind of tome that every parent reads to every child, which I've never, between you and me, never really got as a book. I never really kind of understood it particularly, but the children loved it, and we read it thousands and thousands and thousands of times. And then we were in the pub and we went, we're going on a bar hunt. So we had this idea that was literally that we wrote on a pub coaster, we're going on and we were like riffing about, we're going on a bar hunt, we're going to find a cool one. The babysitter's old, the babysitter's, we're not old. What's that? A pub, a groovy gastro pub. Can't go over it, can't go under it, have to drink through it. And it's about this couple on a night out, and then they join them some friends, and they have to drink through all these different pubs. And then it's hilarious because they get back home and they have to pay the babysitter. And then, of course, they get marauded by the children in the morning. They're not going on a bar hunt again because they've got a terrible hangover. So it was a very simple story and funny to do the kind of parody of it. And we gave it to a friend of ours who's a publisher, and he took a punt on it. And we got hardly any money for it at all. But he put us together with Gillian Johnson, who's an amazing illustrator, and she did these fantastic illustrations for it. And it sold about 200,000 copies. I mean, it's just because it's a gift book. It was funny. It was a funny thing. We were so proud and delighted that it happened. Anyway, so the next one was The Very Hungover Caterpillar, and it's about a daddy who's lying in the light of the hall. Is lying on a sofa, and he has to eat through his hangover. So at 8 a.m. he has one paracetamol, but he's still hungover. At 9 a.m. he has one paracetamol and a can of Coke, a full fat Coke, and 3 rashers of bacon. And so it goes on until it gets to the evening, and he has a full Indian takeaway, right? And then he feels really unwell, and he gets in his cocoon, which is his duvet, and then the next morning he's sort of back to factory settings, and he kind of, it's a beautiful,
it's a story we can all relate to, I'm sure.
Yeah, and no, just really hilarious. And then we did The Teenager Who Came to Tea, which was all about a teenage boy who comes in and just drinks all the things. But I mean, they're all poking fun at us. They're poking fun at our generation and about parenting, and so it's they were really, really fun to do. So we've done quite a few of them.
I think they're an amazing angle to go down, and the world needs that kind of humor. So by all means, keep that going. So let's talk about the Cancer Ladies Running Club, because obviously this is your latest release, and it was obviously very much delayed and is finally out there. So how did that process feel like, finally getting that out after waiting well over a year because of COVID that kind of held everybody up? How did that feel coming out there?
Just amazing. It's just really amazing to see it in the shops. This one's really close to my heart because it's very much based on personal experience. And again, it was a book that I wrote because I couldn't find the book that I wanted in the market. And the book I wanted was a book that was reassuring and that was positive and that was going to make me feel normal when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, which happened in 2017. And I was picked up on a routine scan. I was asked to go for a pilot scheme. They were testing people under 50. Did I want to go for a mammogram? And I nearly didn't go because I was kind of full of Christmas plans and, stuff going on. And Emlyn said, oh, come on, off you go. Go and have a scan. And unbelievably, I was picked up and told early January that I had breast cancer. So I was a real massive shock. And the first thing that happens is your life comes to a sort of screeching halt, it feels. Although it doesn't come to a halt because you're still a mom, you've still got things to do, you've still got books to write. It was quite a ridiculously scary time. And of course, I didn't know for a week that I actually did what was happening and what the actual diagnosis was, because I begged the lady to tell me, what is it? And she said, well, I think it might be cancer, which is not a great word to leave with an author with a very active imagination. So I've written goodbye letters to my children by the time the actual diagnosis comes, because I'm convinced I'm going to die any second. And then, of course, the news comes out and you have to tell your family and you have to tell your friends. And I felt immediately that this massive, she's got cancer label had been slapped on me. And I was like, I don't want to have cancer. I don't want to do anything. Anyway, I landed up journaling the whole thing, which was a very useful thing for me as a writer. I always turn to writing. And so I was writing my thoughts, and I kind of can only say to anybody who's listening to this, who who is going through any kind of hard time or dark time, we were talking a lot about mental health week this week. Write it down. It's much better to get your terrible thoughts out of your head and onto the page where you can see them and see them for the, you know, lies that they are. But it's very important to write all your stuff down. So I'm journaling all of this, and by the time I'd gone through the whole process, I actually had quite a lot of copy. I had quite a lot of funny copies. It's interesting. It's an interesting new world. Some, you know, a lot of interesting stuff, and I had interesting observations and also quite a lot of humorous observations, because there's quite a lot of it that's quite funny. And humor and cancer are not supposed to go together. One of the things that I found most difficult to cope with is that people expected me to be very serious, and I'm not a very serious person. And quite a lot of people couldn't, you know, it was really fun and cathartic to write a mum in the school playground who was a kind of amalgam of characters, but somebody who's just, she can't say the word. So it was really fun to write because these characters happen and they exist. Anyway, so I got this huge amount of copy, and when the whole thing was over, I kind of thought, well, I really do want to put this behind me. I don't want to be a poster girl for cancer, but I kind of felt very strongly I want to, you know, I'm thriving the other side of this. There's a story that needs to be told, and then I tried to make it into a book, and actually it read terribly like a memoir. Quite a long time, and my agent said, well, do you want to write a memoir? And I was like, no, I want to write a fiction book. There needs to be a fiction book. And also, if you do fiction, you can make it broad enough. If it's very specific to you and your journey, it's narrowed down. Whereas I wanted an every woman kind of cancer experience that most people go through in the process of cancer treatment. So, and it was very much, I wanted to chart that thing that when something terrible happens to you, you kind of leave the shores of your old self, and you know that you're traveling to your new self, that you're going to be on the other side of this experience, but you don't know quite how that's going to be. And I wanted to write about that bit. So that was really interesting. And I rewrote it 3 times.
Okay.
Most arse over tip way I've ever written a book. Do not plan a book ever like this. It was just ridiculous the way I wrote it. So it just had its crazy process, and I rewrote it 3 times until I really made it properly fictional. So, but there's a lot of it, of my experience in it. So it's authentic, but it's kind of a bit.
I mean, one thing I picked up there, and something that you mentioned, and something that I know from sort of personal experience with sort of depression, mental health, and what people might be going through as well, is the fact that we often kind of too busy to want to accept what's going on. And you kind of mentioned that when you had your diagnosis, and you're like, you're too busy, you need to write, you need to do this. And it's perhaps a bit of a good advice if you're suffering at the moment with anything, is to actually slow down and accept and be real with yourself as to what's going on, so you can deal with that more efficiently rather than block it out, because it might not help to do that. But obviously that's a tremendous story that you've got, and you know, obviously we're glad that you're at the other side of this, and you use your negative experience in a way as a positive experience for writing and enlightenment for other people.
Yeah, well, I felt very strongly that I needed to write something positive, because cancer is portrayed in the media and in fiction quite often as such a dreadful, awful thing. And yes, I mean, I haven't tried to sugarcoat it at all. You know, I'm aware that there's terrible outcomes for lots of people, but we have great treatments in this country, and we have a screening program, and there are many, many people who are not just surviving cancer, but positively thriving the other side of it. And I felt very strong that we needed to have some stories about those people, because they're not represented anywhere. And with 1 in 2 of us set to get cancer in our lifetime, and 1 in 8 of us getting breast cancer, women in this country getting breast cancer, you know, that it affects us all. And we need to start conversations. It's always really important that if you've got something like this, to take the fear, taking the fear out of it comes through starting conversations about it. And so this was the real point for me of this book, is to start some conversations and to actually just make it less scary. And yes, it is a book about breast cancer, but it's not just about that. It's a book about friendship, and it's about finding your tribe and kind of putting one foot in front of the other and getting through something. So yeah, there's a lot of positive messages in there, and I felt very strongly about it being something very positive.
Well, one of the people in the chat, FJ, she said that I read an article on Josie. I cried when she said during the race, runner after runner tapped me on the shoulder. It's okay, keep going, keep on going. One called I'm clear 5 years, the next 10, and so on. So you mentioned sort of the camaraderie and the understanding of each other in this story.
Yeah.
Why did you lean on that, and why was that important to put into the story?
Well, I mean, it's very much based on personal experience. So when I was first diagnosed with cancer, I was standing by the school gate. So Ros, a school mum, who's also a fitness instructor, said, come on, you've got to keep fit. I said, keep fit? I'm under the duvet with the chocolate biscuits. No. And she said, no, they're building gyms outside on College wards in Australia. Come down to the seafront. I've got a group of women. It's a charity initiative for Albion in the community in Brighton, where I live. I've got a group of women who all go through cancer treatment. Come down and meet them. And I was a bit reluctant at first. And I went down and I met this group of women, most of which one was she was just ahead of me in treatment. She just started chemo. Quite a few of them were out the other side of treatment and getting their mojo. And I'm like the newbie who's about to have an operation. And they just suddenly, I get all the horror stories about infected ports and embarrassing hair loss and all the stuff that's about to happen to me. But they were funny and they were real and they were like, come on, you can get through this. And I suddenly felt for the first time, oh, actually, this is going to be fine, because I've got this group of people who kind of completely understand what I'm going through. And we had this hilarious gallows humor as we were kind of running. And then a few weeks later, I'm down there and there's a guy from the press and he said, oh, it's really great that you're running the Brighton Marathon 10K. And I went, Rob, what? She said,
am I?
Oh, didn't know I mentioned, she said, that this is the training group for the Brighton Marathon 10K. I was like, no, you actually didn't mention that at all. Anyway, so I land up running the Brighton Marathon 10K and it's just before my third chemo and Emlyn's not around. He's gone down to see his dad in Wales. He's really poorly. So there's lots of stuff going on in our family. And I think, right, well, I'm going to give it a go. But I'm very quickly in the race, very hot. I take off my cap and I'm running bald and I'm slowing down and I'm just thinking, what on earth am I doing? I mean, what am I doing? I'm half woman, half chemo drugs. Why on earth am I running a 10K race? This is ridiculous. And then, as the lady says, as I've said before, this amazing thing happened. So these women, all in cancer, different cancer research and cancer charity vests, were running past me. And one tapped me on the shoulder, said, I'm clear 2 years. And then another one said, I'm clear 5 years. And then this other lady said, I'm clear 10 years, keep going. And then the most amazing thing happened was this woman fell into step next to me and she was picture of her, beautiful glossy hair, bit older than me. She said, she said, stage 4 cancer. She said, I was really poorly. Everybody thought I was a complete goner. And I ran all the way through my treatment and look at me now, better than ever. Wow. Keep going. And she really spurred me on. And so I'm running and I'm like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. And I get to the last turn of the race and this runner has waited for me. And I'm like, oh, she said, I'm just waiting for you. I want to talk to you. And I said, what is it? And she said, well, she said, when I was going through my treatment, she said, I was at my lowest ebb. She said, I'm in a cafe, I'm feeling absolutely wretched. And this woman from across the cafe comes over to me and says, I know how you feel. I've been there and I want you to have hope that it's going to be okay and you're going to be better than ever the other side of cancer. And this woman in the cafe had taken off this little butterfly necklace, which she'd given to this runner and said, this is a little butterfly of hope. And I want you to have hope and just know that you're going to feel better than ever. And so this runner in the race then gave me the same necklace and said, this is your little butterfly of hope and you can wear it and pass it on in time, but just know you're going to be fine. And we had this hug and a little kind of few tears and off she went. And I don't even know her name. And I had this beautiful butterfly necklace and I thought, oh, wow, what an amazing thing to happen. And I thought, well, that's got to go in a book. That's just amazing. Anyway, so I've been wearing my little butterfly necklace for 3 years, but I now have this one, which I'm wearing today, which my friend Alice, who runs Posh Totty, which is a Brighton jeweler, she's making me a little butterfly of hope. So I don't know if you can see, it's got a butterfly on the front and then it's got hope on the back. And we're using them, with the book so that people can have something to give somebody if they need a little bit of a boost. So it's been so to have that. So there's a competition going on at HQ at the moment. You can win one and a signed book. So there's all of that sort of marketing activity going on. And I would love nothing more than to find this amazing runner who gave me this necklace. But it was just such an inspiring thing. And I, you know, life is always stranger than fiction, but I kind of thought that has to go in a book. So it
just proves that people, they must find humor in the darkest of places. And not only that, the people who have gone through these things and come out the other side always have such a compassion in their lives that, you know, they makes these wonderful stories. And by all means, please send us the links to these wonderful necklaces and all these things, and we will share them.
I'm so grateful. You know, it's such a lovely thing to have. And also the other thing is that, you know, when you get cancer, when you get diagnosed with cancer, people want to tell you, people want to show you that they care. And what happened to me is and I know what's happened to quite a few of my friends, people send you flowers, which is great. But if you get more than like 3 bunches of flowers, your house is now full of jam jars because you don't have enough vases. And also then it starts to look like a mausoleum, and you're like, oh, this is
and bees.
And so now you need now having a little necklace to pass on is a really lovely thing. But it was such a life affirming thing, and I thought, and it really that day of the race, it really turned my headset around. I kind of thought, actually, this can be a positive thing. You know, all these women are brilliant. The other side, they're all running. You know, nobody heard stories about that. So, but it was, you know, so I wrote this book, and of course there was a bit of a kickback. There was a book auction. I was lucky enough to have another book auction, but quite a few of the publishers were like, can we have cancer in the title? Can we? And my publishers, HQ, who really got the book, were just like, no, we're going balls out. This is the title. We're doing it. And I'm so pleased we stuck to our guns, because, you know, there's nothing else out there like it. But also it's kind of having cancer and running in the title is kind of quite an arresting thing.
I think it's kind of old fashioned to think the publishers these days still won't publish a certain book because there's not quite the timing for that book, or, you know, they won't publish something with the word the name cancer in the title. But if that's what the story is, that's what the message is, then you must put it in the title, because people won't find it otherwise.
And I do think that it's up to authors to lead the way on these things. I really stuck to my guns on it, and I'm really, really glad that I did. And I think it's quite easy to forget for authors, because, you know, we're beholden to the publishers. We're the creative ones. We're the ones with the ideas. We're the ones that are putting our stuff out there. We're the ones that are trying to find a new patch to spread some of our writing light on. And so, yeah, you need to stick to your guns.
I mean, now the pubs are back open in the UK, technically. You can go and get some more stories and place them on Beer Mats as well.
Yes, I'm really hoping I can.
Balls out, definitely a new one for me. That's quite a common phrase in the UK, I think. Means going for it, doesn't it? And just being confident and going for it. Okay, so we've got a few staple questions, and everyone, guys, if you're watching this or listening back on the podcast, first of all, thank you. But secondly, go and get that book, and definitely we'll share the links to that with the necklace promotion as well, because even if you can just buy those and gift them to someone who needs that, is such a wonderful idea. So definitely. So a few simple questions we have on the show, which we'll ask you, and the first one being, if you could take a character from any book, and we always kind of throw this open to TV and film, and write that character into one of your stories, or do something completely new with that character, what character would you take and why?
That's a really tough one. Off the top of my head. Possibly Scarlett O'Hara.
Okay.
From Gone with the Wind, and I would probably update her and put her with all of her ridiculous airs and graces into somewhere where she was a fish out of water, and that would be quite funny to see her do that. I quite like that. I quite like that kind of I like how spoilt she is, but how she keeps her kind of how her kind of spoiltness stays even when she's faced with a civil war. I mean, So yes, there's quite a lot of controversy about Gone with the Wind, obviously, but I do like her as a character, just because she was one of the first characters that I ever read that was kind of so you like, wow, she does that, you know, she's quite special, yeah, quite a special character. So, and I love reading characters like that in books where you just go, oh, they're, you know, so interesting to kind of see people that kind of got this kind of real fiery personality. So yeah, but I mean, I could maybe come up with a better answer if I had longer to think about it.
Well, we do like to spring this question. I've told Chris on the show plenty of times that perhaps we should email this ahead of time, but he's convinced that no, we like to see people's reactions when we drop it on them. So unfortunately, that doesn't happen. The second one of those questions, it is very kind of similar lines, and that is, if you could change the ending to anything, and again, literature, TV, film, what would you change the ending to?
I think maybe My Cousin Rachel, Daphne du Maurier. I'd want to know for sure whether Rachel was evil or not. That's the kind of that, because it's left so ambiguous, and we have this kind of this horrible thing the whole time where we're shoved from pillar to post. Is it? Isn't it? Is she? Isn't she? And I've always wanted to really know. So I'd like to know.
I've not read that, and I guess it's left on a cliffhanger. What do you kind of feel like cliffhangers?
Left on cliffhangers, you kind of really respect authors for doing that, but then you just go, oh, I'd love to know, love to really know. So yeah, there's quite a few books. I mean, I really like Stephen King. But there's Due McKee, which is one of the books that I really loved. It kind of goes a little bit, it goes a bit sci-fi at the end. And it always slightly annoys me when you're kind of reading and everything, and then somebody comes, oh yeah, it was the aliens.
Yeah, aliens.
So I do get annoyed when authors kind of do something a little bit supernatural at the end to tie it all up.
I've got a question on that then, and it's something, you know, we had Sarah Pimber on the show a couple of weeks ago, and Behind Her Eyes was an amazing, story, and the ending was incredible and a real curveball, and that kind of went a bit sci-fi. Like, have you read that, and how did you kind of feel about that?
I haven't read all of it, but I have read it. I know all about it. I think she's done a very clever thing in that she's done something clever, because she's written a kind of psychological thriller, of which there are many. About kind of a toxic group of people, but then done a spin on it, and good for her, and she pulled it off.
Wow, yeah.
You can pull off a twist. That is brilliant. You know, go for it. I'm just saying that sometimes you can get endings where it's a bit kind of like lazy.
That was a twist on a twist that I did not see coming.
Yeah. But no, it's good for her, and also what a great way to market a book. It's the twist, because then you go, I want to know what the twist is. So, you know, good for her, and it is a good twist. So, you know,
when we had that show, we mentioned the spoilers all the way through the start of the show. I put the video on Reddit, and someone had commented about, I was kind of halfway through watching this, and I was seeing this show. I was like, you couldn't have seen or been announced more about the spoilers in that episode, and you still watched it. I'm just like, well, can't be helped. Okay, so one more question then, and we'll have one or two from the community, and then we will kind of wrap up in, well, we've got about 10 minutes. So what will be a point of satisfaction in your career as an author? What will you be satisfied with in the end, to think, you know, I've kind of hit my satisfaction, I guess, level of writing, and I'm happy with this? What is that? What does that look like for you?
I don't really ever think about that far into the future. I mean, I fully intend to be writing when I'm 70 or 80, you know, and actually one of the things that I love most about writing is that the older I get and the more I do it, the better I get. And but I still really feel like a novice, because, you know, you start to learn how things work, and you start to learn a lot more about character and plotting, and you learn the skill, and you learn the confidence that you will actually get it finished. But I've had such a kind of choppy and changey career in that I've been lucky enough to have a collaborative career with Emlyn, which I hope that continues, and to write as Josie Lloyd, but as Joanna Rees as well. So I've written these massive, great big sweeping commercial women's fiction books as Joanna Rees, which I write for Pam Mac, and they're really fun. And I've just finished a trilogy, which is all set in the 1920s. So that's been really fun to write. So I've written London 1926, Paris 1928, and the last one is 1929, New York and LA in 1920. So that's really fun. And they're all different skills. And actually what I really love is just using these different skills. I always say that if you want to be really successful as an author, do one thing again and again and again. Never, don't change your name. Just do it really, really well and become a brand. Don't do what I've done, which is done this over here and that over there and that over there. But, I love all these different projects, and I'm really lucky enough that a lot of them, they've been published. So as long as I can kind of keep going, I'm only really as focused really as the next book. I don't really look too far into the future, because you can never tell, that whether you are still going to have a career. I mean, I'm pretty assuming that I will. I hope I will, but you have to go with what comes up and what the direction feels right. You can't really plan. What will it feel like? I mean, it feels pretty good at the moment to have written a book that has resonated with people and helped people is a really special thing. Not every book is like that, but to hear that this has made a difference to some people who are in a dark time, that is properly the loveliest thing that's ever happened to me as an author. For sure.
It really is wonderful. It's what was the attraction for writing sort of the 1920s? Because it's a very romantic time to look back on, but I imagine it wasn't a very romantic time to be in. And how did you kind of research to go into that?
It's called The Runaway Daughter, the first one. So I started off with the sort of premise of this girl who runs away from a Lancashire cotton mill. To be honest, I'm channeling my inner flapper girl. So it's a kind of fantasy story about a girl who comes down to London and she nearly dies. She's complete fish out of water, and she's taken under Nancy's wing. Nancy is a lapsed American debutante with a lot of trust fund money, but is, naughty, and they become dancers at the Zip Club in London. And but my girl Verity, who is actually Anna Darton, has this big secret, and will her past catch up with her? So I love all that, I love all that drama, and it's kind of big broad brushstrokes, and you get to go to lots of different places, and a lot of big romance thrown in and stuff. So really fun. And actually, but what I've found, which I've never done before, because I've never written a trilogy before, I came to write the second one, and of course I've got the setting, I've got Paris 1928, but I've already got this ready-made set of characters and conflicts. And actually, when I went back into the first book to look at it, I was like, oh, I set that up. Oh, and I set that up. And then the third book, which I wrote in lockdown, was a joy, because of course I had all these characters. So I can really, for the first time, see the appeal of writing a series with returning characters, because actually you get so much treasure to play with as a writer when you've kind of already established these characters and these conflicts. So, maybe I'll write a massive saga next. I don't know.
Yeah, I've only written 2 books at the moment, and my third is kind of in the process, but the first 2 were a series. And I kind of did exactly what you did in the second, when I'd finished the first and I was sort of just writing the second as a skeleton, and I very much pantsed the story. There was very, very much a lot of interlinking stories between characters and backstory that I didn't plan on, that just propelled the story. And it must have been the same with you.
This is what I mean. This is like this rich treasure that you can keep finding. And actually, if you put enough conflict in, I mean, this is what I found, all stories need to start with a really good conflict. But if you start with a good enough conflict, that is treasure, that is meat that will keep you going and going and going and going in a story. Brilliant. So actually, it's really fun. And I mean, I got to the end of the third one, and I wrapped it up, but I was like, oh, I miss my characters. So I'd love to go and write more, because I want to know what happens. So yeah, it's quite interesting. So I did really like that. But I'm writing a second book now. I'm writing a second Josie Lloyd book at the moment, which is all about sea swimming, which is really fun. So I've been doing lots of sea swimming, and it's about mental health, but it's about being by the seaside and swimming. And again, it's about, I've started it in Christmas 2020, because actually it's been quite interesting for commercial fiction writers to not know what to do about the pandemic and whether to mention it or not to mention it. So it's actually quite right. It's been quite fun writing a book in real time about coming out of it. So that's quite fun.
Interesting indeed. We've got a question in from Life, and she says, do you have any advice for humor? I've got characters that want to be funny, but I'm not a very funny person. How do I allow these characters to bring out their funny sides in novels? And that's a great question.
I think you have to give them permission to speak. I think that most characters, you will find that they will say something funny if you want them to be funny, and you will put them in funny situations for starters, but give them a chance to speak, and let them. And I would say write quite a lot of dialogue and find a funny situation in which they're talking. So it's always quite fun with humor if you put a character in a scene where they're slightly conflicted because they've got to be doing something else that requires them to be serious, and then you juxtapose that with actually what they're saying. So you can set up some comedy ways in which you can let your characters be naturally funny. But I would say just let them speak is probably funny. Is probably the easiest way. And also just have confidence. If you tell yourself if you tell yourself that you're not very funny, I mean, you're never gonna, that's not a great place to start from. So just start from the permission, giving yourself permission to be funny and your characters to be funny, and just going, I can be funny, and these are funny characters. Just let them be. You quite often find from the tone of the message, it sounds to me like her characters are struggling to get out. So just give them permission.
Well, one thing I've noticed from our conversation is that you're very observational, and almost in the sense of observational comedy, you kind of bring that out in a lot of your stories. So is there a way that you kind of pick up on that, or do you just naturally find things quite funny in real life and then use that as experience when you write?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I'm a great embellisher as well. I mean, always embellish a story. I think that you find real life and look at it and see what piques your interest and what amuses you, and go from there. I think humor is something that kind of happens naturally, but also it's something that happens when you're quite relaxed. I think it's difficult to force it, and I think that when I'm writing comedy, actually writing quite fast and not editing as I go along is actually possibly the best way to do it. Always go back into a scene and write it, but I would say that comedy happens when it's spontaneous and you do it quite fast. So write quite quickly, I would, and then go back in.
Fantastic. Just before we wrap up then, the one thing that I'd love to see moving forward, and I mean, you've had so many amazing stories about your journey as an author and, as experiences moving on into where you are now, that this should be, the next thing you should write is your memoir and, into a film. That's it.
Yes, I know, but that's very sweet of you. I'm hoping that they will do a film of the Cancer Ladies Running Club, but as my life is, I've been very lucky, but my life is quite dull. I'm an author. The fun thing is the stuff on stage.
I've seen some worse films. I mean, you've got great stories about your youth and, working in these things, and it kind of gives a really good impression, a visual impression that, you could see this as a well-linked story. And with the necklaces, things like that would be an amazing touch to see in a film, and really emotional. But as we're mentioning that, you mentioned that you can get these necklaces or in a promotion. Where can they go to get those again? And where can people find your work?
Right. If you go on Twitter to @HQ Stories, who are my publisher, they are running a promotion at the moment with Mumsnet. It's a Mumsnet promotion, so you can win a necklace and a book. If you just want to go and buy a necklace, you can go to poshtottydesigns.com, and they're the Butterfly of Hope necklaces. If you want to find me, I'm at Josie Lloyd Writer on Instagram and Facebook, and Josie Lloyd Books on Twitter.
Amazing. Well, I will share those links and forward the show on so that people can find it. And it's been an amazing story, and can't thank you enough for coming on and
Oh,
sharing it with us.
So lovely to chat to you. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to all the people who've kind of asked questions and stuff. It's been really lovely evening. Thank you.
It's fantastic. I think the message of the night, guys, is that, you know, if you're in whatever scenario in your life, is obviously Josie mentioned writing things down and you know, almost keeping a record and being real with yourself about what's going on, and just to talk. It's one of those things that seems so difficult at times, but it's kind of just one of the easiest things to do, and it helps everybody out, I guess, in the end. So please do talk to us, to the people in the community, and just look after yourselves. And thank you so much, Josie, for being on the show with us. And we will see you all. We've got a couple of guests on Wednesday and Friday as normal shows, which we will tweet about later as well for you guys that are interested. And thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure, guys. Stay safe. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.